In VA TMJ, 1 mm can separate $337 with qualifying diet evidence. Professor Duran is here to help us separate jaw motion from the evidence around it. Stay to the end, and I'll show the 3 evidence pieces that make a millimeter measurement usable instead of isolated.
1 mm changes the band because DC 9905 measures maximum unassisted opening. 10 mm sits in the 0 to 10 range. 11 mm begins the next range. That boundary is not a suggestion to chase a lower number. It is a reason to make sure the examiner records the safe, unassisted range accurately.
We're continuing the rating series with a condition where the examiner's ruler and the treating clinician's diet note can change the result together.
That sounds almost too mechanical. Someone can live with daily jaw pain and carry a TMJ diagnosis in the C file. Could the percentage still be lower than the pain feels like it deserves? 0 to 10 can reach 40 or 50%, but that difference must come from the regulation's evidence rules.
Correct. My cross-check reads the jaw as a movement map, not a diagnosis label. For limitation of temporomandibular articulation, the schedule starts with maximum unassisted vertical opening. The DBQ identifies normal maximum unassisted opening as generally 35 to 50 millimeters. The compensable bands begin at 34 and move downward. A diagnosis establishes what condition may be present. The measured motion and supported functional evidence establish how this schedule evaluates it.
So 10 and 11 sit on opposite sides of a real boundary.
Put 10 and 11 side by side. Without a qualifying diet restriction, 0 to 10 millimeters is 40%, while 11 to 20 is 30%. With restrictions to all mechanically altered foods, those same bands become 50 and 40%.
That table explains the curiosity hook, but it doesn't promise anyone a result. Diagnosis alone doesn't set the percentage. This isn't for someone without service connection. The schedule doesn't produce a payable rating until that link is established. The examination must support the measured range, and the diet limit has to meet the regulation's definition. A number without that chain is only a number.
So the training rep is not tell the examiner it hurts. Describe what the jaw can do. Explain what happens with repeated use or a flare. Then identify what food has to change. The result depends on measurement plus documented diet, not on finding dramatic words.
And separate self-protection from documentation. Don't force the jaw past a safe limit for a claim. Report the movement you can perform safely, the point where pain or restriction begins, and the ordinary tasks that fail when symptoms worsen.
The regulation's food language is concrete. It lists blending and chopping, plus grinding and mashing. This chef is generic illustration of chopping food into smaller pieces. It isn't proof of anyone's medical diet. The treatment note still needs to connect the preparation method to the jaw condition.
One more boundary, lateral excursion, limited to 0 through 4 millimeters, has its own 10% evaluation, but VA can't combine that with an interincisal opening evaluation.
VAProfessorErica.com has free guides for organizing the medical evidence and claim file before the exam, but
wait, what if the jaw measures differently during a flare? Then I should describe the flare without trying to recreate it in the exam room?
Exactly. The DBQ asks whether flare-ups cause functional loss and asks the examiner to estimate additional loss when medically possible. A useful history gives frequency and duration, then names the movement that fails. It may explain why an appointment on a better day does not tell the whole story.
The measured range opens the door. The evidence file tells VA what that number means in real life. Coming up, the DBQ shows where that history belongs and why a home ruler doesn't replace the examination. One thing before the next part, and then we move right on. If any of this is clicking, tap that like, hit subscribe, and ring the bell for the next one. It takes a second, it costs nothing, and it helps more than you would think. A flare day measurement may differ, but the examiner still has to begin with an actual range and explain any estimate. That makes the appointment a measurement session, not a pain story contest.
This close-up is a generic dental exam, not a VA TMD test. It shows the practical point. The mouth has to be observed, and the findings have to be written while the details are fresh.
The exam records opening in millimeters. Specifically, the schedule calls for maximum unassisted interincisal range, the distance between the upper and lower front teeth when the patient opens without the examiner forcing the movement.
I call that the safe number rule. Show what you can do unassisted and safely. Don't turn the exam into a dare. Pain and clicking belong in the history. Tenderness and weakness belong there too. Functional loss matters, but it doesn't replace the measured range. Tell the examiner where pain begins and whether opening farther would be unsafe.
Let me line up the no diet restriction column. 30 to 34 millimeters is 10%, 21 to 29 is 20%, 11 to 20 is 30%, 0 to 10 is 40%. 4 bands, each measured in millimeters.
And if my better day lands 1 band higher, I'm worried the bad days vanish. I still should not force motion beyond a safe limit just to demonstrate the worst day.
They should not vanish. The TMD DBQ asks whether flare-ups occur and how they are described. It also asks whether pain or weakness significantly limits function. Fatigability and incoordination are considered with repeated use or during flares. When appropriate, the examiner may estimate additional loss from the available evidence.
But the claimant has to describe repeat use limits in plain language. Give frequency and duration. Name the trigger and the movement or chewing task that fails. It gets worse is honest, but it is too vague to help someone estimate a range. After 10 minutes of chewing, I can no longer open wide enough for a sandwich, is observable and specific. A home log can preserve that pattern, but
wait, does a home measurement count as the VA measurement? It can document a pattern, but it doesn't replace the clinician's examination.
Track it, but don't grade your own claim.
Exactly. A home log can preserve patterns and help you describe a flare, but it isn't a substitute for the clinician's examination. This generic clinician illustrates the habit we want: a medical professional writing findings, not a claimant trying to manufacture a number.
One correction before we leave the ruler: 0 to 4 millimeters of lateral excursion is 10%, but that lateral rating can't be combined with an interincisal opening rating. Which other evidence can move several of those bands upward?
Before we get to the monthly difference, Professor Duran is back with us to show how food texture can move a rating band only when the restriction is physician verified.
Erica's safe number rule now has a food side. Don't exaggerate what you eat, but don't hide the adaptations that make meals possible.
Food texture can raise several bands. The regulation recognizes soft and semi-solid foods as one level. Full liquid and pureed foods are another. Restrictions to all mechanically altered foods are a third level, with the no restriction column as the baseline. The exact effect depends on the measurement band. A label like soft diet cannot be slid into the all altered food column just because it sounds severe.
Mechanically altered has an exact meaning here. Food is changed by blending or chopping, grinding or mashing, so it's easier to chew and swallow. These hands chopping vegetables show one listed preparation method. They aren't a prescription for any person.
A personal preference for soft food is not rating evidence. The regulation says a mechanically altered diet must be recorded or verified by a physician. The file needs both the texture level and its medical verification. A grocery list alone doesn't establish why chewing requires the change or how broad the limitation is.
The rows change differently by measurement band. 30 to 34 millimeters can rise from 10 to 20 or 30% depending on the supported diet level. 21 to 29 can rise from 20 to 30 or 40. At 11 to 20, the schedule uses 30% without the qualifying restriction and 40% with restrictions to all mechanically altered foods. At 0 to 10, those values are 40 and 50. The ruler chooses the row. Verified diet evidence chooses the applicable column, unless...
Wait, are those food labels interchangeable? No. The physician must record or verify the restriction, not interchangeable.
Exactly. A restriction to full liquid and pureed foods is also distinct from soft and semi-solid foods. The examiner needs to identify the level supported by the treatment notes, not collapse every adaptation into one vague box.
This blender makes the texture change visible. Solid ingredients become a smooth mixture. The clip is generic food preparation. The medical evidence still has to say why that level is required for this patient.
The chat found the uncomfortable version. What if a doctor knows about the diet but never writes it down?
Then ask for an accurate treatment note. Don't ask a clinician to write a rating or legal conclusion. Ask the clinician to record the actual restriction, the medical reason, and the foods or textures the patient cannot manage. Documented. Professor Duran, thank you for keeping the texture categories as precise as the measurement bands. Give us the movement map rule one last time.
My closing cross-check is the movement map. Measure the opening, describe the function, and verify the diet.
That map takes us to the payment difference without turning it into a promise. If the treating clinician never records the diet restriction, the fix is an accurate medical note, not a rating request disguised as a note. Now the base rates show why that missing detail matters. $337.06 separates 40 from 50%.
Current rates. No hype.
$337.06 is the monthly gap between the basic 40% and 50% rates for a veteran alone, effective December 1st, 2025.
The 40% rate for a veteran alone is $795.84 monthly. The 50% veteran alone rate is $1,132.90 monthly. Subtract the first from the second. The difference is $337.06 each month using the current basic rates.
That gap lands every month.
The important word is base. Those are the published basic rates for a veteran alone, not a guaranteed TMJ payment or separate add-on. Dependents and other service-connected conditions can change the payment. Offsets, special monthly compensation, and combined rating math can change it too. The condition must be service-connected, and the evidence must support the scheduled percentage. Money is the stake, not the eligibility test.
Erica, if someone already has other ratings, the calculator can't simply add 40 and 50 as whole dollars or whole percentages.
Right. VA applies combined rating rules to the full disability picture, then pays the resulting combined evaluation. This receipt isolates the published 40 and 50% veteran alone rows so the monthly difference is visible. It doesn't predict the change in every existing award. That's why the title is a curiosity door, while the episode keeps returning to the complete file. Service connection and the complete evidence still matter. Daniel is a hypothetical 42-year-old veteran. His jaw measures 10 millimeters, but his file doesn't document a physician-verified limit to all mechanically altered foods. That evidence may support 40% under DC 9905. The same result doesn't automatically prove 50.
Daniel's example also shows who this isn't for. A diagnosis with normal motion and no qualifying diet doesn't jump to 50% because the jaw hurts. The schedule still asks for the measured range and matching evidence. I reach for the regulation printout before the calculator.
Chris, that's also how I label my orchid shelf. Condition first, water second. The plants object to my order of operations.
Newton probably sides with the orchids.
And that's the exact math discipline here. Establish the qualifying condition and evidence first. Then read the payment row, reverse the order, and a headline number becomes a promise the file never made. Erica, your orchid rule survives the audit.
This generic paperwork is not proof of anyone's VA award. Before the decision, the C file needs 3 distinct pieces. It needs the safe maximum unassisted number, the functional history across ordinary use and flares, and the medically verified diet level. Missing one doesn't erase the other two, but it can change which row or column the evidence supports.
Send this to the person comparing 40 and 50%, then let's assemble those 3 evidence pieces before exam day. Three records before exam day: symptoms, food texture, and the clinician's note.
A short log makes the pattern concrete.
Track a usable symptom history, not a speech. Note the flare-up and the chewing limit. Write down which food textures fail and what adaptation works. The point is to make the pattern retrievable when the examiner asks, not to rehearse a performance.
List flare frequency and duration. Add the triggers. Then record safe opening and chewing failures. A short entry might say that a flare lasted 2 days and made crusty bread impossible. Another might say speaking through a long meeting increased pain and reduced opening. Ordinary details make the function visible.
Then make the one appointment. Bring the log and ask the treating clinician whether the restriction is medically necessary. Do not ask for a guaranteed rating. Ask for an accurate treatment note.
Right. Ask the treating clinician to document any prescribed restriction and the medical reason. The note should identify whether the diet is soft and semi-solid, full liquid and pureed, or restricted to all mechanically altered foods. Those phrases are different rows in the schedule, so accuracy matters more than intensity.
The DBQ asks about flare-ups, repeated use, and functional loss. It gives the examiner a place to connect the measured range to the reported pattern. Bring relevant treatment notes so the examiner isn't hearing the diet limit for the first time with no clinical context, but
Emma, does the log need daily entries?
no fixed VA diary format. It needs enough detail to show a reliable pattern, unless
Emma, reliable means every day?
reliable means accurate and consistent, not mechanically daily.
The useful action is arriving prepared, not trying to memorize legal language.
Forms love a cue.
Yeah. Keep the two measurement paths separate.
Interincisal opening and lateral excursion ratings don't stack under DC 9905. The regulation directs VA not to combine them, so 2 limited motions don't become 2 evaluations under this code.
2 measurements. 1 evaluation path.
Yeah. Sit with that one.
The path is clear now. Measure safely, describe function, verify the diet.
If you're half listening in the car, keep one phrase, maximum unassisted opening.
And 1 rep. Request the treatment note this week. This dental conversation is generic footage. Accurately describing the jaw problem is the point.
If the schedule or combined rating math is hard to apply, a VSO or another VA accredited representative can help review the file. Accreditation matters. A representative can explain the process, but the medical evidence still has to come from accurate examination and treatment notes.
My verdict: the strongest TMJ claim connects the measurement to function without inflating either. It gives the examiner a safe number, gives the clinician an accurate diet history, and gives VA evidence that can be checked against the schedule.
Walk away with this: 1 ruler, 3 records. That's the rep.
If the 1 mm line clarified the evidence, tap like and subscribe for the next rating checkpoint. Which missing piece will you build first? The flare log, the measurement, or the diet note? Take care of yourself, and I'll meet you at the next decision point.